We all know ancient Rome to be the birthplace of Western civilization as we know it today. It is a whole lot of work to build a civilization, but what did the ancient Romans do when they were not working? Yes, you guessed it right, they partied! Ancient Roman parties were quite iconic. You've probably heard that the Romans threw the wildest parties that included wine, food, and even orgies. When most people hear about Roman parties, they instantly think about the kinds of parties that Caligula or Nero threw, extremely raunchy parties. But these were not all Roman parties were about. In fact, these kind of parties were not the norm. Welcome back to Binge History, where we will be speaking about what partying was like in ancient Rome. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more content just like this one and turn on post notifications. With all that done, let's binge history like we binge eat. The Romans had two major types of parties: private parties and the much larger parties that included everyone. The private parties were mostly dinner parties. These dinner parties were known as convivium. The convivium could be held by literally anyone, rich or poor. However, history only tells us about the parties of the rich and influential. The convivium was usually held in the triclinium. This means that these parties were held in homes and residences, just like how you invite a few friends over to your house for a little get-together. On the other hand, the public parties, also known as Epulum, were held on the streets, in the temples, and in open spaces in general. These kinds of parties were either religious or civil holidays. The Romans did not play with their holidays. Examples of these parties include the Saturnalia, aka what the world celebrated before Christmas, and the very famous Bacchanalia. We'll come back to what happened at these parties, but first, let us look at why the Romans partied a lot. Well, in their defense, when you're the most successful civilization in the world, it shows that you're very hardworking. And you know what they say about all work and no play? Well, even though the Romans were very hedonistic, their parties had motives. One can even argue that the networking parties we have in the business world today were gotten from the Roman convivium. A convivium was mostly organized for people to socialize and network with each other. If you wanted to meet an influential person or get a favor from the high and mighty, all you needed to do was to host a party. In fact, the seating arrangements were made for this sole purpose. At a typical convivium, there was a U-shaped couch where the guests and the hosts all sat together. This couch would typically accommodate 3 people on each side, making it a total of 9 guests, but with time they made bigger chairs and an individual could have up to 12 guests. Of course, as with everything ancient, women weren't invited unless they were entertainers. So the seating arrangements were pretty simple. The highly esteemed guests were seated in the middle where they could be the center of attention and also get a good view of everything happening. The host was seated on the right with a few friends if they wished, and the less important guests were seated on the left side, which is ironically called the lectus summus, or the high couch. Other times, parties were just a display of wealth and power. Then a few times it was for celebratory purposes, either a wedding or something of the sort. But the most common parties were thrown to display power and affluence. The best parties were measured by 3 things: the food, the drink, and the entertainment. Yes, contrary to the opinion that the Romans were a horny bunch, they did in fact love fine dining. Let's paint a picture of what a top-tier party would look like. When you get to such a party, you would expect a 3-course meal, hors d'oeuvres, the main course, and dessert. Sometimes it can even be a 6-course meal depending on how lavish the host is feeling. Fun fact, the more exotic the food, the greater the party. And if the host is looking to impress, this is definitely one of the ways. The delicacies included chicken, flamingo, venison, hare, lobster, oyster, ostriches, nightingales, peacocks, and wild boar, to mention a few. Snails and caviar were a staple. They were eaten so much that they had special cutleries made for them. Contrary to what you might have heard, vomitoriums were not a fixture. The Romans were more cultured than you think. Enough of the food, how about the wine? Of course, the Romans loved their fine wine. The wine was served in many forms, but the most common were conditum and muslum. Conditum was a type of warm wine infused with spices, while the muslum was much sweeter. It was a type of honey-infused wine. Another fun fact, the Romans used to water down their wines a lot. In fact, it was considered uncouth to drink undiluted wine. This helped to curb intoxication while allowing them to have more than just a glass of wine. Now for the entertainment. Live entertainment was displayed in the dessert. It could range from poetry and acrobatics displays to more gruesome displays like a gladiator battle. If the host was a rather naughty one, they could invite sex workers to mingle with the guests too. Cheaper alternatives would involve making the slaves entertain the guests. It all depended on the host and the point he was trying to prove. Of course, this video won't be complete if we didn't tell you about the public parties. When such parties were held, schools, courts, and markets would all shut down so everyone could party. For example, the Saturnalia was a week-long party. Morals would be relaxed and the people would go wild. Of course, there was an abundance of food and drinks. More religious parties like the Feast of Jupiter, also known as Epulum Jovis, would even include the attendance of the gods. Of course, the gods attended as statues, but they were still as revered. You thought we wouldn't talk about the famous Bacchanalia. Impossible! The Bacchanalia was held in honor of the god of wine, Bacchus. Roman literature has credited Caligula, a Campanian priestess of Bacchus, with founding the private, unofficial Bacchanalia religion in Rome. The Bacchanalia was first a private ceremony that women attended 3 times a year, but over time it became chaotic. Of course, it was more than a wine festival involving lots of wine and drunk people. It was more than Rome's little sex holiday. In fact, this festival had to be sanctioned by the government in 186 BC because of the orgies and killings that happened. An investigation was carried out on religion and its activities. Results of the investigation showed that the priests and acolytes broke civil, moral, and religious laws with impunity under the guise of religion, and that weak-minded individuals could be persuaded to commit ritual or political murders undetected at the order of those who secretly controlled the cult in the heart of Rome. The religion was first restricted but not banned by the government. This was an attempt to curb a large number of worshippers the religion had gathered, but worshippers still continued in the secret, but with more caution. With time, Greek elements began to make their way into the religion. The religion was said to have been merged with Liberalia. The Romans sure did know how to party, but let us look at the famous parties that gave Roman parties the reputation of debauchery that they have. Even though the ancient Romans were very sexually liberated, Roman parties were not typically full of revelry and debauchery. However, there are few occasions that gave Roman parties the reputation that they have, and these few events were very popular because they were organized by famous Roman emperors. Let's look at these stories. Some of the most famous party hosts include Nero, Tiberius, and the famous Caligula. Of course, you must have heard about Caligula. The famous raunchy Roman emperor was assassinated, but before his death, he was a menace to the citizens. Caligula was famous for his parties. He would organize a party and invite all the couples in the country, and they were forced to attend. He built 2 pleasure barges where he had these notorious parties. During his parties, he would whisk away the wives and go have fun with them while their husbands waited. And when he was done, he would come out and narrate the stories to everyone. Some people say that he did this because he was not handsome. They even likened him to a goat. He only ruled for 4 years before he was eliminated. The government even tried to eliminate him from Roman history because he was such a disgrace. But, well, we are talking about him now, aren't we? Well, we hope you liked this video. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel without any delays. Make sure you turn on the post notifications and also let us know in the comments section about your views on ancient Rome's parties. Thank you for watching Binge History. Until the next time we meet, continue learning and stay healthy.